Oh, hi. Today I'm going to talk about a watch I'd love to own, but could never wear. But let's get into it. Yes, and welcome to the Mad Watch Collector Show. Now, watches don't come more iconic as the one I'm going to show you today. The Rolex GMT Master has been around since 1954 and originally was commissioned for the pilots at Pan America Airlines. In the 50s, it was now possible to go on your holidays transcontinental. So planes were now able to travel a long way, and from the point where you took off to the point where you landed, the time zones were now different. So the boss at Pan Am wanted their pilots to have a watch that could track 2 time zones. Now, Rolex weren't the first to make a watch like this. They actually took inspiration from the Glycine Airman. This was the first one. I really need to get my hands on one of these bad boys. But Rolex were the first ones to use this red and blue color scheme. This is what is fondly known as the Pepsi bezel. Anyway, the blue and the red signifies the night and day. The bezel was bi-directional, and the GMT Master was available right up until 1989. But in 1983, Rolex came out with the GMT Master 2, a movement with a complication now that the hour hand could be independently moved from the rest of the hands. And thanks to Watchfinder, I've got a 2021 126710 BLRO to show to you today. The BL stands for bleu and the RO stands for rouge. Now, this is a watch I would love to own, but I would never wear it. But I'm going to save those reasons for the end of the show because I think you might be interested. Also, hear what the wife had to say about this watch. Are you GMT Master ready? Let's go! And ladies and gentlemen, here is the 126710 in all its glory. And no matter what you think of the brand, you cannot deny how beautifully made this watch is.
It's well annoying.
For starters, like any modern Rolex I've ever held, this thing feels luxurious, like you'd be dead peed off if you got it scratched. That red and blue is so beautifully iconic, and it's a design that hasn't really changed a lot since its inception in the 50s. And for most of Rolex watches, you can see the lineage in the references really easily. So we've got a 904L steel case and bracelet. It's a steel that polishes up real nice. We've got brushing on the lugs, polishing on the sides of the case, nice big crown guards protecting that hugely awesome coin edge crown. The 3 dots on that crown signifies that this is a triple lock crown, ones that are used on their dive watches. We've got your generic Rolex case back with nothing on it, but with this watch it's the front of the face that does all the singing and dancing.
It does have a cyclops.
Definitely not a fan of those, and I agree with my wife that cyclopses are for granddads with dodgy eyeballs. But listen, the cyclops has been with this watch for many a year, so we can let it off. But first impressions, this is a pretty but definitely capable Rolex. Quick spec check! So the case is 40mm in diameter, which is 1mm smaller than the current Submariner. It's just over 12mm thick, 48 lug to lug, and a lug width of 20mm. This watch is going to sit well on most wrists. The dial is protected by a flat sapphire glass, no AR coating on the inside, but I don't think it's really needed. This watch is water resistant to 100 meters. We've got a trip lock crown and a screw down case back like their Submariners that have a 300 meters of water resistance. My guess is that this watch can go deeper if it needs to, but it's too pretty, you wouldn't want to anyway. The bezel on this is bi-directional. A little bit disappointing there's no ratcheting. It's like a push more than a click or a ratchet. Have a listen. It's just not hugely satisfying, but a great scalloped edge like the Submariner, and that bezel insert is beautiful, isn't it? The inserts in the first GMT Masters was Bakelite, a plasticky construction. They then moved on to aluminium purely for durability, and now all modern Rolexes with a twisty bezel have what they call a Cerachrome insert. Super! Basically Rolex's ceramic compound, much more scratch resistant and pretty much indestructible. Having ceramic on the bezel insert and having 2 tones was a huge challenge for Rolex, and it was done by layering a colour on top of another colour, and both the red and the blue had to have a bit of colour of each other in order to blend. What's interesting is if you shine a UV light on this bezel, it's red.
Very cool party trick.
Onto the bracelet, and it is very similar to my Explorer 214270, but the GMT has polished center links, which I'm not a massive fan of. A proper tool watch should be all brushed, but this one is a bit showy, isn't it? The clasp is the same as my Explorer. There is that 5mm easy link adjustment in case your wrist gets a bit big and sweaty. Very well made, and Rolex are king of bracelets.
Could you just click that like button, please? It really helps the channel. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about the face.
Dial time.
And yeah, everything about this dial says,
Look at me!
we've got a piano black dial, white golden framed indices, white gold handset with that very cool painted GMT hand. We've got the Cyclops at 3 o'clock. Even though there are only 3 lines printed on the bottom of the hand stack and 2 above, there is a lot going on in this dial, and there's not much space for anything else. That being said, it's a truly iconic looking design based on the Submariner's dial, and it's rather lovely. So we got lume on the handset, lume on the indices. Out of 10, let's see how this puppy glows. So Rolex is chromolite in all its glory, never massively glowy, but hardly ever dies out, and I really love that colour of blue. Part of me wanted that upside down triangle on the bezel insert to be lumed as well, but hey, it's not a diver, is it? It's a blingy pilot's watch. So powering this GMT Master 2 is Rolex's Caliber 3285. It's an automatic chronometer certified movement, pumping away at 28,800 beats per hour, 70 hours power reserve, and it's going to gain or lose 2 seconds per day. A truly genius piece of kit, and it's a movement that is never going to let you down. So here's how to set a true GMT watch. First of all, unscrew the crown to the first position, give it a little cheeky wind, and make sure there's power in the watch. Pull the crown out to the last position, the seconds hand will stop, and move all the handset to the 12 o'clock position. This is just going to be easier for you when we're setting the times. Now, I've just got off the plane and I'm in a different time zone, but first I want to know what the time is where I've come from. So crown still pulled out in the last position, I'm going to set the time using that GMT hand. That's 4 p.m. This GMT hand only does a full rotation of the dial every 24 hours. Push the crown in. Now here comes the magic. Now I want to know the local time. So I pull the crown out to the second position, and now I can move that hour hand independently from the other hands. And the local time is 2 a.m. One thing to point out with this watch, there isn't a quick set date. In order to adjust the date, you need to move the hour hand twice around the dial for that date to change over. Push the crown in, and there we go. I've tracked 2 times. So I know the local time, I know what the time is where I've come from, but a good friend of mine has landed in another country with another time zone that's 2 hours ahead where I've come from. Well, this is where the bezel comes in. Simply move that bezel 2 hours forwards, and I've now tracked 3 time zones. Oh God. And now, time for the epic magical macro montage. A segment that proves even luxury watches have their imperfections. On my 6.5-inch wrist, and this watch looks great, doesn't it? It's a bling monster, but the proportions on my wrist tells me I could definitely get away with wearing this watch. I love the tones of the red and the blue on the insert. Yes, it's a tad bit showy for me, but everyone needs to show off once in a while, don't they? Now, I'm all right with this one being blingy. Still, whenever I think of airline pilots, I think their job is so cool. And back in the 50s, the pilots back then were like rock stars. This, although it is a tool watch, probably won't leave the cockpit and can be as bling as it wants. So there you go, the Rolex GMT Master 2 126710 Bleu Rouge. I think this is the most recognisable Rolex to people around the world, not just to the eyes of watch enthusiasts. That red and blue is so iconic and so popular that brands from Seiko to Tissot to to Tag Heuer. And Tudor, let's not forget, have used that colour scheme to sell a lot of watches. This Rolex is probably at the top of the desire list when you talk about GMT watches. All in all, it's a watch I'd love, but I would never wear it. And now's the time to tell you why. So in my hands I have two true watch icons. The Rolex GMT Master 2 and the Casio F91W. Ironically modded in a Pepsi variant. So both icons in their own right, and actually the accuracy of both these watches are pretty similar, which is mad. But there is only one of these I would actually wear. And yes, it's the Casio F91W. Now, first of all, this watch is way out of my price range, even at the retail cost. On the used market, a 2021 126710 is gonna cost you very close to £20,000. But that's the going rate on the pre-owned market. And that brings me on to the main reason, wearing the blooming thing. When I buy a watch, I want to use it for basically what its function is, to tell the time. We have seen a rise in luxury watch theft. And if your watch is spotted for someone that's looking out for key features, like a big blingy blue show-off Rolex, not only you could be in danger, but your family could too. Now, I live in a nice area, but even when I took this watch out of my house and filmed me wearing it outside, I was very wary. Obviously, half of that is in my head, and there's probably a 98% chance of never being mugged at all. But if I ever did wear a watch like that, you'd have to make a point of always covering it up or choosing not to wear it if you go to certain places. That's why the only Rolex I do own is an Explorer, a very subtle and simplistic looking watch that doesn't say, "Look at me!" It's understated, and that's how I like it. Therefore, if I did own a watch like this, which I won't, I'd be too scared to wear it, and it'll be in a watch box, not doing the job it was made for. A safe queen. And I'm sorry, but that is not how I do my watches. They're there to enjoy and bloomin' wear. Here it is, my wife's first impressions of the GMT Master 2. What a beauty. This thing pops. I do like the colours red and blue, but it's a little bit showy, like look at me. I hate the polishy bits on the strap, and the magnifying glass on the watch just says old man to me. For a Rolex, this is quite fun, but also look at me. For someone that said he was done with Rolex, I sure have talked about him a lot, haven't I? Thanks to WatchFinder for sending this in today. Also, check this show out. This is incredible. Oh my gosh. Some of my finest work, obviously. Yes. Go on, click it. It's lovely. Click, click, click it!